Hello, everyone. I am Ariel Palitz. I'm the Executive Director for the Office of Nightlife at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this new Open Culture Program informational session. Today's call will be an hour long, and we will begin with some opening remarks from Commissioner Andel Castillo from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, which will then be followed by some remarks by Council Member Van Bremer, who wrote the legislation for this program. And then we are going to hear from the Executive Director of Citywide Events Coordination and Management, Ellen Canfield, to give an overview of the Open Culture Program. And then we will hear from Stefan Grabowskis, who is the Director of SAPO, which is the Street Activity Permit Office, who's going to give a more detailed presentation about the Open Culture Program guidelines. During the opening remarks and presentation, we encourage you to begin to submit your questions into the Q&A chat. And right after the presentation, we're going to get right into your Q&A and just keep them coming, and we will try and get to as many of them as possible. So without further ado, I will introduce Commissioner Del Castillo from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariel, and welcome everyone. I think, the Open Culture Program and this call are the results of a number of city agencies and colleagues working together for you and with you. I want to especially thank the Deputy Leader of City Council and Chair of the Committee on Cultural Affairs and Libraries, Council Member Jimmy Van Bramer, for his leadership and advocacy in getting legislation passed that set us up to launch this program. I also want to thank Commissioner Casals and his team at the Department of Cultural Affairs, as well as, of course, Executive Director Ellen Canfield and Citywide Events Coordination and Management for their partnership on the program. And finally, I want to thank the team at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, Ariel Palitz from the Office of Nightlife, Leah Jones-Harvey from Industry Initiatives, and Carla Hoke-Miller from our theater division in organizing today's event, as well as their ongoing work to facilitate open and productive dialogue between New York City's creative community and city government. As Commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, I'm charged with supporting New York City's creative economy, film, television, theater, advertising, publishing, music, digital content, and nightlife. I think we would all agree that New York City's creative economy is key to the city's revival. Before COVID, these sectors represented 150 billion in economic activity and over 500,000 jobs. And we know how hard this pandemic has hit all of you on today's call. You were the first to close and are likely the last to open. When COVID hit, our agency went from cheerleader to crisis counselor. And we've been working with all of you really since last March to try to get the economy up and running, creative economy specifically up and running as quickly and safely as possible. And we've done that with a focus on 4 key areas: ongoing communication through town calls like this, surveys, conference calls, sharing information through our website and newsletter, advocacy for sure, fighting for financial assistance, grants, unemployment benefits, marketing and promotion of activities that have continued even during the shutdown to make sure people were aware that the creative community was still working to connect people through content. Also through media sponsorship and public awareness campaigns like virtual NYC Curator Collection, NYC Loves Bookstores, Gen Arts NYC, and festival and conferences. And then, of course, programs like this, programs partnering with our colleagues in government to create things like Music for the Soul, where we worked with 802 and Health and Hospitals to present live performances on Facebook for our frontline workers off Broadway in the boroughs pop-ups, where we did pop-up performances throughout the 5 boroughs, and New York Music Month extended play, which is actually going on right now, with 6 months of events to help support New York City's music community. And then, last week we announced two major programs that affect you in particular. Curtains Up NYC, which offers free webinars and one-on-one counseling for groups that are applying for shuttered venues grant operators grants. And then, of course, Open Culture, which we're going to talk about today. I just want to do one more PSA about a town hall that we're hosting tomorrow on healthcare for workers in arts and entertainment that may be of interest to you. And then I'll just conclude by saying, we know that we still have a lot to do to support the recovery of New York City's creative economy. But nevertheless, through the pandemic, we've continued to see the resilience, the creativity, the innovation and collaboration that keeps New York City moving forward. Creativity has led the city through every crisis, and we know that it's creativity that will lead us out of this one. I want to thank you all for being here. And now I will pass the baton to Council Member Jemmy Van Bramer.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I want to thank all of the agencies that are represented here who have worked with us. I am very proud to be the sponsor and author of Open Culture, and I'm really proud to be the chair of the Cultural Affairs Committee, which means I get to represent you, all of the amazing artists and arts groups, cultural organizations, independent theaters, performance venues, all of you. And this is an important program. It is something that can help transform the city, lift up our spirits, and most importantly, get artists back to work, paid for their work, and allow all of you to start creating, making, entertaining, and driving some revenue back into your own organizations and also back into the local economies. We all want a just recovery for the city, but there is no just recovery for New York City that does not include a just recovery for artists and arts organizations and so many of you who have been closed since mid-March and have had no ability to perform, draw revenue, employ artists, and do the wonderful work that you do. So it's been an honor and privilege to work with so many of you. Jack Bernadovitz, my legislative director, who is embedded with the cultural community, and you all through all of the Zoom calls, conferences, the Culture at 3 have made this legislation better. And I know we're still working some things out and still improving this program. And that's in large part because of the advocacy of the cultural community itself and the way in which our office has involved the cultural community in this piece of legislation. When you do it transparently and openly, well, you get a better result. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying that this is everything that we can and should do for artists, far from it. But this is a good step. It's something I'm really proud of, something I'm proud to have worked with all of you on. And I know that all of us will be better off if Open Culture is a great success and there is music and dance and comedy and performance breaking out all over the city of New York, and people can experience the joy of the arts, and artists can feel alive again in so many ways, as you can only do when you're performing before a live audience. So thank you, and look forward to making this program as successful as it possibly can be.
Thank you so much, Council Member, for recognizing all of those truths about the need to begin to reopen and revive our nightlife and culture and arts. And this is a great step towards that. So thank you so much. And also to Commissioner Andel Castillo for all of the incredible work to reopen and recover from this. Now I'd like to introduce Ellen Canfield, who's the Executive Director of Citywide Events, and she will give an overview on this program.
Take two. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you so much, Council Member and Commissioner. And I just echo what everyone said, that, this is a small piece of what we, all of us, are hoping to bring to not only your communities and industries, but so many in the city who've been so impacted and devastated this year. And very so grateful to you have just, I will say you all have incredible advocates in the city, in the council member and in the offices of media and entertainment and cultural affairs and office of nightlife. And I think what we have and what we're excited to talk with you about today is an opportunity, and we can all be excited that other things are happening and opening all around us, with the announcement yesterday with movie theaters reopening at 25% capacity. Again, we know it's hard. It's always, none of these opportunities are for everyone, but the good news is that in addition to these specific programs, we are all working towards getting folks vaccinated, getting people back to business as usual, and keeping these opportunities happening at the same time. So just a couple of things really quickly. We, I think I've spoken with many of you before, and my refrain has not changed, which is that the demands on streets are more than they ever have been. And in addition to programs like this, we have vaccine sites, testing centers, a lot of these essential services continuing to happen. And, that demand on streets, we had to put some specific carve outs around this. And I know some of those things feel disappointing or limit what you all were hoping to do, but I hope what we can do today is connect some dots so we can help you envision what could be a really workable performance in a way that will be meaningful to your organizations. The opportunity to sell tickets for a street permit without fees is really a huge change. Took some significant shifts of policy that, as you all may know, don't usually happen so quickly in government. So kudos to everyone for working with us to figure this out so we could offer this opportunity for you. And of course, we'll get into a lot of questions around that. I have one really big update. So this is breaking news live on this information session, and we are updating our website and getting documents out to everyone. We got a lot of feedback from all of you, from stakeholders, that the restriction on not having consecutive days for performances or for the permit was just a huge hindrance to the work that you were wanting to do. We spoke with community boards, talked to others, and we're really excited to announce that we have changed that guideline. So Stefan will go into this more, but it will essentially be permit holders can apply for up to 4 days per month, and those can be consecutive. So up to 4 consecutive days every month. You don't have to have consecutive days. Folks can still have a single day performance. You could still apply for example, every Thursday night if you wanted to have some kind of a weekly show, but it's 4 days in total and they can be consecutive. In addition, there will only be 1 permit required per month. So if you're applying for 4 days in that month, that's 1 application. And we're really hopeful that that cuts down on the number of permits you need to fill out and application fees. And also, of course, the opportunity to have consecutive days. Stefan will touch on this. One key requirement to just make this work for communities, for streets, for emergency services is that any infrastructure you have in the street will have to be removed overnight. So unfortunately, that doesn't mean 4 straight days to build out and leave stages, et cetera, in the street. This continues to be the goal, is that it really is a pop-up, very mobile performance. However, we hope that change will really open up some new opportunities for folks. And again, we'll be getting all that information out on our website and in documents soon. So with that, before I turn it to Stefan, again, thank you. We will walk through this specific opportunity. We'll also continue to be here to help connect you to other spaces, park spaces. We offer a free permit if you aren't trying to do a ticketed event and you just say, hey, we just want to have a band in this area. You're not charging anything. That already exists as a free permit. So there are a lot of other opportunities. We know it can be challenging to figure out what works for you, but hope that through this call and these info sessions that we make it just a little bit easier to figure out, or to at least know who to go for with your questions. And we're excited to work with you all to see some incredible work performed. And I will kick it over to Stefan. He does not have his camera on because he's going to show you his screen. And as folks have said, please do keep asking questions in the messages and we'll use those for a Q&A.
Thanks, Ellen. Just give me a sec while I turn my screen on. Thumbs up, Ariel, you can see. Okay, good. Thanks, Ellen. So I'm just going to try to do a quick overview of the open culture guidelines. Like Ellen said, we have some updates to this, and our website now reflects those updates as well. So I'll go through that along with all of the eligibility criteria, and then we'll get into your questions. So I'm Stefan Grabowskis. I'm director of the Street Activity Permit Office. Our office lives within the Mayor's Office of Citywide Event Coordination and Management. As Ellen said, and I just want to reiterate this because I think it's really important. It's one of the biggest questions we've been getting. This is not the only opportunity in the city through permitting to do cultural events. This is an expedited permit that helps certain organizations that meet eligibility criteria on getting a quick permit that allows them to sell tickets without fees and collect donations without fees. But as Ellen said, nonprofit organizations are still eligible to submit regular street event permits anywhere in the city through SAPO, do events on plazas, which are not included in this program, through our typical street event and plaza event permits. And you can also apply to parks to host events in parks as well. So the open culture is a new permit type that we're offering on top of all of the existing permit types that we already have, which allows for arts and cultural institutions as well as entertainment venues to secure permits for socially distant at over 100. And I think the number is close to 200 now. We're up there getting close to 200. The list is on our website and it has been updating over the past couple days. Applications are going to be considered on a first come first served basis. This is the same as we have always permitted everything. So we accept applications on a rolling basis. You do not need to submit an entire year's worth of events on March 1st. You are welcome to, but we accept them on a rolling basis. Just also to be clear, I think there's some language on here that is a little bit confusing for folks. We are having a rule change hearing on Friday morning, February 26th. That is to establish the rules in the rules of the city of New York that we need to implement in order to operate this program. Not everything in the guidelines is reflected in the rule changes. The rule changes are a little bit broader than these specific guidelines, but just to be clear, we have to have a rule change in order to implement this program, and that is taking place on Friday. Also, another key thing, if we're not able to get to your question in this Q&A and they're not answered in the FAQ on our website, you feel free to email openculture@cityhall.nyc.gov. We will have our staff respond to your questions there. We've been getting questions through that box already, and we'll have a human being respond to your question. So that should be helpful if we don't get to your question now. So just to go over some of the details, I'm going to kind of breeze through this as I'm sure many of you have poured over it already. Applications open on March 1st at 12 p.m. The application fee is $20. As Ellen said, we're going to accept up to 4 events at a single location on a single application for each month. So say you wanted to pick, I'm just picking, random street in Brooklyn. You can apply on under one application. This is a new update we've just added. You can apply under one application for 4 days per month at that location. If you want to do another location in another 4 days, that needs to be on a separate application because it's a different location, but we have now changed it from requiring an application for each day to an application for up to 4 days, as long as it's at the same location, and 1 per month. And that fee is $20. The permit fee is, there are no additional permit fees on the SAPO side. We originally would charge up to $25,000 for these events if they are commercial events that charged for tickets, but we no longer have fees thanks to this legislation and the rule changes that we're implementing. The deadline to submit, and like I said, our application system is rolling, but the latest you could submit for an event is 15 days prior to your first event start date. We are going to give you a response once we received your entire completed application within 5 business days. We need to receive all the documentation in order to give you that approval or denial. Like Ellen said, the big update is that you can apply for up to 4 events per location per month. Those events can be on consecutive days. They do not need to be on consecutive days. You do not need to apply for 4 events if you do not want to, but that is the flexibility that we've now added. And you must submit 1 application for each location for each month. So if you want to do stuff in March, we need 1 application for March. We need 1 application for April, 1 application for May. But that's now changed, not 1 application for March 15th, 1 for the 17th, 1 for the 18th, et cetera. So just to be clear, that's a big difference since we first released the guidelines. The locations. So all the open culture locations are on our website, which is nyc.gov/openculture. All these locations have been determined and vetted by DOT, and those are the only locations currently that you can permit these events at. Like I said, you can do other SAPO permits every street in the city in theory. So if you want to apply for a free cultural event, feel free to reach out at to our office and we could talk about how you could do a free cultural event at any location throughout the city. But for the purposes of this program, they are restricted to the blocks that are included in this program. So in terms of eligibility, there's two main buckets of eligibility. One is the art and cultural institutions, and then the other one is the cultural venues. I think mostly everyone on this call may fit into the second bucket, but I'm going to go over both anyway. For the art and cultural institutions, the applicant or sponsor. So if the applicant is not eligible, you can partner with a sponsor who is eligible to submit at least one of the following types of documentation. That is, either you're a member of the DCLA CIG group, DCLA Cultural Development Fund grant award letter, the same thing for CDF, but a notification letter, or documentation establishing that the applicant or sponsor received funding from Borough Arts Council in 2019 or 2020, or if you have not received any of that funding, but you believe you would potentially be eligible for that funding, you could submit the following documentation, which is a 501c3 IRS Form 990 with the NYC address and background material documenting that you have a 2-year track record of cultural activity. We will then make the determination. Moving on to cultural venues. So the law defines, the open culture law defines cultural venue as an entertainment facility in the city of New York intended or designed to be used for performance in front of a live audience. For example, a theater, music venue, comedy club. The applicant or sponsor is going to be required to submit at least one of the following types of documentation. So if your venue has a liquor license, you could submit a copy of your SLA license or your community board stipulations if you have them, showing that your method of operation allows for live music, performance, or entertainment. This would include things like live music, DJs, comedy, theater, or other performances. If you do not have a liquor license, you could also just submit us documents indicating that your entertainment facility is regularly used for live performances. So this could be a website advertisement, playbills, press clippings, indicating that you had at least 3 ticketed performances from 2019 to 2020. There is an exception if you're, say, for example, your venue opened just at the beginning of 2020 and then was shuttered and you didn't have any live performances, you can send us other documentation and we can talk about it off through, you can email that email box with questions about what this might look like, but we're willing to look at other documentation that indicated that you were intending to use your venue for live entertainment, but you weren't able to during that time period. So there's some flexibility here, and I just want to make clear this stuff isn't super set in stone. If you have questions about it, reach out and we're happy to work with you. So time frame on the permits. The permits are for a single month of events, as I said before, with a maximum of 4 event days per month for each applicant or sponsor. This applies to sponsors as well. This does not preclude, if a sponsor wants to have 4 events, sponsor 4 events at one location, this does not stop them from sponsoring 4 events at any of the locations throughout the city. So if there's upwards of 200 locations and you can host 4 events per location, 4 times 200, that's the number of events that a sponsor could theoretically sponsor per month. They just need to meet that limit at each location. For events at all permits are limited to a maximum duration of 12 hours, which includes the setup and breakdown of event elements. So if you're loading in, your load in needs to be within that 12 hours. Your event needs to be within that 12 hours, and then you need to be off the street within that 12 hours. Some locations may have additional restrictions placed on them, but that is the maximum duration of any event. And for events on consecutive days, if you were choosing to apply for that, all the event elements have to be removed after that 12-hour time frame and then brought back in the next day if that's what you're choosing to do. The street needs to be reopened after your permit concludes for that day. Amplified sound and event programming, this is based on sound permit code, but can start no earlier than 9 a.m. and end no later than 10 p.m. There are additional restrictions on sound permits and event programming and noise in certain locations, and we'll discuss that with you if that's the case. But if there's a church service going on Sunday morning, you may be restricted from amplified sound during that time window, but we will work with you to try to figure that out. COVID-19. So For now, and for the foreseeable month or so, at least, there are several restrictions on events based on COVID-19 pandemic restrictions. Right now, I think the big one is that there's a 50-person non-essential gathering limit throughout the city. That limit is lowered in certain areas which are called micro clusters, which are set by the state, and these guidelines are set by the state. That may limit the event to 25 or 10 people, depending on if it's an orange or yellow zone. So citywide, it's 50 people. That's inclusive of cast, crew, audience, volunteers, staff, etc. But in the orange zones and yellow zones, it may be restricted further to 25 or 10. The New York State, we'll link to this on our website if we haven't already, but the New York State cluster sites are available and they kind of shift week to week, but generally they're have been pretty static and hopefully getting better. Another big limit on events right now, and this is really to reduce crowd size, and this is definitely going to be around for the short-term future, is there's an executive order limiting the NYPD from issuing sound permits to people that are using a stage or a video screen. You can use a stage or a video screen without a sound permit. You can also use a sound permit without a stage or video screen. But if you'd like to use a stage until this executive order is lifted, and this is to create control issues with crowds around stages, and stages are big crowd draws, but this is, we've been operating under this executive order for the past 6 months. But if you're free to use acoustic on a stage, you're free to use sound permits with nothing on the stage, but anything that's elevated on a platform above the ground is considered a stage. And same goes for video screens. Everyone's required to submit a COVID safety affirmation plan, which is essentially a checklist. We have it on our website available to download. This is basically you affirming to you're requiring masks, keeping everybody socially distant 6 feet away, putting up signage to remind people to keep socially distant, all of the stuff that we are used to living with under this pandemic. But that is not, we're not going to be inspecting your health plan with a fine-tuned comb, but we are going to ask you to affirm that you're taking these steps, and that document needs to be submitted with your application. Like I said, non-essential gathering limits are subject to change. If we approve you for an event a few months from now and the limits change, feel free to reach out to us and we can take restrictions off your permit and raise the number of people if that changes down the road. Like I said before, only the locations that are designated for this program are available for use in this program, but again, does not preclude you from not applying for other SAFO permits that are available and have always been available on any city street or plaza, or applying through the Parks Department for a permit with the park. Those that are using a location with existing open restaurants on them need to set up at least 15 feet away from the outdoor dining enclosure. There aren't a ton of locations with open restaurants on them, and most of them have only 1 or 2 restaurants. But if you are setting up on a street with open restaurants, please set up at least 15 feet away from an outdoor dining setup. Emergency and pedestrian access. I think this kind of gets confusing for some. We require a 15-foot emergency lane at all times with no obstruction by any event element. This needs to run the entire length of the street. It could run down the center of the street. It could run down the parking lane of a street, but it needs to be unobstructed at all times by any event elements. This does not include people. So if you have a crowd of people watching a performance, those people can move in the event that a fire truck is trying to get through. But it cannot be obstructed by a stage. It cannot be obstructed by any speakers or anything like that. That can run down the parking lane if the cars are not there. It just needs to be straight all the way down the street. Event elements can also not be placed on the sidewalk, so everything needs to be in the roadway. Street closure and security. So security and closure of streets, your responsibility as an applicant. This does not mean we're requiring you to have security, but it does mean that the NYPD is not going to serve as your personal security guards for your event. If you have security or wish to have security, that is your responsibility. The NYPD will obviously always be available to respond to any emergencies, but they're not serving as a security guards for the event. Same thing goes for street closures. Street closures you need to close the street, whether it's through cones or barricades that you've requested or borrowed from the NYPD, or barricades that you procured on your own, or rope and stanchion, or whatever is available to you. that is your responsibility. The police department is not going to come and close the street for you. You must obtain no parking signs in advance from the local precinct in which your event is taking place. I strongly recommend you reach out to community affairs, the community affairs officer in the precinct of where your event is taking place. They will be the ones that can assist with helping you apply and get a sound permit. But they're also the ones that potentially can help you get barricades. Barricades are not guaranteed for any of these events, but you can request them, and if they're available, the NYPD will provide. But I would not always count on that being a possibility. But no parking signs are issued by the local precinct. You should get those. You should go reach out to them as soon as you apply for a permit and get the no parking signs, so you can put them up as far in advance of your event as possible to assist with people moving their cars in advance of your event. Sanitation, you are responsible for the cleanup of the street. Everything must be removed and taken off the street. No garbage should be left there at all. Sound. So I know that, I think this has been confusing, and I just want to reiterate, amplified sound is permitted. There are the restrictions about the stage and the screen, which are temporary, and those are due to COVID and crowds, but those are not necessarily going to be in effect for the duration of this program. We do not know yet, but sound permits are possible, and amplified sound is permissible. You do need to apply for a separate sound permit from the NYPD. This is the only additional permit in this program, and it's spelled out in the legislation, but you do need to apply for a sound permit if you want to use amplified sound. You need to apply at the precinct, as I said, where the event's taking place. Temporary fencing and enclosures. So you may use temporary fencing, barricades, rope and stanchion to enclose the event and restrict access to ticket holders. However, capacity is based on other guidelines. Right now, obviously, that capacity is 50 people. In the future, when that 50-person limit is lifted, there are other restrictions on capacity, which is probably up to 200 people per pen. At this point, we do not need to worry about that, but down the road, we will need to worry about that. That is to prevent you having to apply for a temporary place of assembly permit. So we can discuss that if you have an event further down the road, what those restrictions are. Another key thing here is that barriers or fencing cannot prevent members of the public from viewing the event from outside your designated event space. This is spelled out in the legislation. These are events in public spaces. People cannot be scrimmed or prevented from viewing the event. You can sell tickets to seats inside of your area. You can offer a special experience to people that are participating in your event, but you cannot restrict people from watching if they walk by. Barricades, like I said, provided by the NYPD are not guaranteed, but you can request them from the local precinct and they'll be provided if available. The city supply of barricades is very low, but you can request them, and if they're available, they will provide. Another key thing is the legislation has a carve out where you're not required to get film permits in order to film your event. At these specific open culture events, we actually encourage you to film your event or live stream your event to also help keep the crowds under control and to keep these events smaller during the times when the restrictions are higher. So you are able to set up a camera and film the event. I believe MOM is going to have signage that you can print and download available on their website that is you should put up if you are filming, so that passerbys know that they're going to be on camera and avoid your area if they do not want to be on camera, which is those standard release signage that you see in public places when there's filming. I'm going to just try to hurry this up because I know we're running out of time. Production in vehicles and queuing, we're just recommending that you keep all queuing to the street that you're assigned and keep all production vehicles parked on the street that you're assigned. If you do not want to have to apply for separate permits that have separate fees, if you're trying to use additional blocks for production parking, that needs to go through standard SAPO production vehicle parking, which has its own fees and are not exempted through this program. So you should just keep all production vehicles on the street that you're assigned, and also keep any queuing lines that you would like to set up on that street as well. Ticketing and donations, as Ellen alluded to, and this is the big change here, you can sell tickets or collect donations without the need for additional permits. Insurance, commercial general liability insurance with a minimum of 1 million per occurrence with the city listed as additional insured. This is a requirement. However, there is an insurance hardship waiver in our rules. If applicants that cannot afford insurance can include a letter addressed to me seeking a hardship waiver. This letter should just needs to be an email to me that you upload, or a letter on letterhead that you upload to the application portal, or you send to us after you submit your application, that just says, you know, the cost of insurance, we're anticipating this much money from this event, and the cost of insurance is like, you know, this much, and it doesn't meet, it exceeds 25% of how much we're going to make. If you're doing a free event, not ticketed event, obviously the cost of insurance would exceed that. But if you are a member of a large organization, we obviously would expect that insurance would be included and cover the event. So that letter is not complicated. It does not need to be super detailed. It just needs to be a request for the waiver and explaining that the insurance exceeds that amount. Site plan and run a show. We will have a site plan template and a run a show template on our application portal and on our website available for download. The site plan does not need to be a super sketched out CAD drawing or super architectural drawing with precise measurements drawn to scale. We're just looking to see that you indicate everything that's being set up on the street, where it's going to go, that there's going to be a 15-foot emergency lane and where that's going to be, and then making sure that the fire hydrants are labeled and they're not being blocked by stages or other elements. And then in terms of the run a show, we're looking for setup and breakdown time. So that's what time the street is going to close, what time you're going to set up until, what time the event starts. We'd like you to list what's going on at your event in terms of performances, when that event is going to end, and then the breakdown time, which is when the street reopens. We are going to match your permit times to the run a show times. Programming with names of artists, musicians, guests should all be included, and any other scheduled activities. Again, this doesn't need to be second to second, minute to minute, but it should just be a rough breakdown with hourly and as detailed as you can provide. Just in terms of prohibited elements, so this is our long list of no's. I don't mean it to sound scary. It's also, these are all things that require very expensive outside permits from other agencies, and violate other parts of the various codes of other agencies. So, and if you have any question on any of these things, feel free to reach out to that email address that I gave you before. Like I said, events are limited to 50 people as of February 1st. That could change, but for now, we anticipate that continuing into March, and from there on, we'll see how that goes. Unreasonable noise is just don't violate the sound code in terms of decibel level. I think that's understandable. The noise code is there if you want to read up on it. Stages exceeding 120 square feet or over 2 feet in height. This is what's permissible in the building code without having to apply for an expensive architecturally approved buildings permit. Same thing goes with structures, props, and trusses exceeding 10 feet in height. Tents and canopies are permitted, but they cannot be over 400 gross square feet. So that's like a 20 by 20 tent. Generators are permissible, but they need to be under 40 kilowatts and cannot be truck or trailer mounted. And the same thing with those generators, they need to be under 2.5 gallons of gasoline or 10 gallons of diesel fuel capacity. So what we recommend are those handheld generators, not anything big on a trailer or that's going to have issues with the fire department. No open flames or fires. Pull taps are not permissible. Those require outside permits from DOT. Sales and distribution of food, including packaged food and beverages, including alcohol. And the same thing goes for sales of goods and services other than tickets and donations. None of this is permissible. Sales and distribution of food, I think there was a question in the chat, so I may as well just answer it now. This does not preclude a restaurant on that street that has an open dining setup from selling their own food in their own enclosure, but selling food as part of your event is not permitted. Those require expensive and additional permits from the health department to do, and it's not the goal of this program. But nothing is to stop you from. You cannot sell T-shirts and CDs directly at your event in exchange for cash. But if you wanted to include a T-shirt with your ticket, there's nothing here stopping you from doing that. So I think there's some creative ways to think about this. But selling CDs and food and all this stuff outright at your event is a different challenge. Food cannot be served or sold regardless. But in terms of T-shirts and merchandise, I think there's some creative ways of including that with a ticket that you sell online. If you have questions about that, just reach out to us directly. No live animals, no horse-drawn carriages. I don't expecting these to be included, but I'm saying it here for the record. Inflatable or erected rides, including bounce houses, carnival games, games of chance are not permitted. Hydrant taps as a source of water, you cannot tap the hydrants without an additional permit, and that's not permissible in this program. Special effects, so pyrotechnics, fireworks, fire performers, sparklers, anything that explodes, fireworks are illegal in New York without a permit. Anything related to this, dangerous, involving fire and explosions, is not permissible. Again, any clarification on any of this stuff, reach out to us directly. Over-dimensional vehicles, these are just vehicles defined by DOT of a large size that need special permits to navigate the streets. Do not use those for loading into your event. Use vehicles that are not over-dimensional. No cranes, and then elements or activities that place an excessive burden on city resources or personnel. So this is really targeting A-list celebrity appearances at these concerts and events. That's why we ask for the run a show and we want to see he's performing. If you're expecting to have a Kanye West at your event, it will likely draw some concern from us and may result in your permit being denied. Again, we understand that A-list and what a celebrity constitutes is subjective. And again, if you have questions, just reach out to us and we can talk you through it. But we're talking about people with enormous social media followings that would generate an unsafe condition on the streets if they were to appear in public and cause mayhem. So we're not talking about local small celebrities. But again, if you have questions and understanding that this is subjective and there may be some questions about what constitutes a celebrity, we can definitely talk about it directly. And just again, this is the last piece and we'll go into Q&A. Sorry for taking so long. Enforcement. So if you do not adhere to the guidelines and we get reports that there were issues at your event and that you told us that you were not going to be selling food as agreed to in the application, but then you had a street fair set up, we would send you a violation letter, which wouldn't necessarily include a fine, but we would ask for you to explain what happened and your response and your future behavior at other permits may jeopardize your future permits. So just keep in mind that, we reserve the right to deny future permits based on what happened at your event. We obviously will give you a chance to explain any kind of complaints that we got, and we can talk through that process if anyone has any specific questions. But yeah, I think that's self-explanatory. I think with that, we can take it over to questions.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for a really incredibly thorough explanation of the program. We understand that there are about 15 minutes left in the allotted time. We are going to go over at least 15 minutes to try and get to as many questions as possible right now. And then we are also going to copy and paste them and do our very best to get answers to any of the questions that we didn't answer and send them in a follow-up email to everyone who RSVP'd. We will do our very best to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to the Deputy Director of the Office of Nightlife, Jose Sogard, who's been going through all the Q&As. Let's get to it. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. So I'm seeing several questions about what constitutes eligibility for an applicant, and that includes sponsorship as well. So I'm seeing questions from folks who represent music schools or individual musicians or musical groups, folks from churches and synagogues, or event producers or promoters that don't have brick and mortar establishments. Can you guys talk a little bit about program eligibility and how folks who might not be immediately eligible obtain a sponsoring organization?
Sure. Ellen, do you want me to take it?
Great.
So just in terms of eligibility, I mean, the eligibility is fairly broad. I think, as you can see in the cultural venue section, we're not always asking for very specific documentation. I think if you are a newly established venue, we'll definitely give some leeway in terms of interpreting that. When it comes to sponsorship, we're not asking for a lot in terms of what constitutes sponsorship. If you partner with an organization that meets any of these criteria and they're willing to count the event towards their 4 events per month at that location, you should just provide us with an email from that organization agreeing to sponsor the event and also list them on the application. They will be listed on the application. They will be listed on the permit along with you. So that's for those that aren't eligible directly through the eligibility criteria that's listed there. I think if there's questions about, I know we got some questions in another town hall about brick and mortars. I think we aren't specifically looking for you to be a brick and mortar. I think a lot of the groups that are in the cultural institution section are not going to be brick and mortars, maybe a dance troupe or somebody that doesn't have a fixed physical location, but that does not mean that you would not be eligible. But I think if you can meet the other criteria, that makes sense.
The quick question from Greg, who's looking to host a dance event. Seems like he's asking if people in the cast and crew are counted toward that 50-person gathering limit at this time.
Sure, I can take the gathering limit question, and we know that this is tricky and is a small number. So the 50 people, that needs to encompass cast, crew, volunteers, attendees. That's your whole allotment. We know that at any given time, there will be more than 50 people in the street, some people just going about their business on the street, some folks walking by and watching. This is where it really does get to the individual planning that we will do with every single applicant, and why we do need at least like that very short window of time we have. We're going to be working with you to identify what's the plan that makes most sense. It will be different, for a ticketed performance where, okay, I'm walking by and Lysistrata, I don't know why that's the play that just came to my mind, but it's the middle of Act 2 and I might stay and watch for 3 minutes, but I'm not going to like stand there and probably, call like 45 people to come join me and watch. I might do that if it were Kanye West joining, which is why we're going to ask you to not have A-list celebrities or people are going to be those huge draws. We have a good sense of what builds crowds in New York and what types of things people are going to really flock around from other blocks to, and that's what we're trying to detract from, while recognizing that some of the streets are in higher pedestrian traffic areas and are going to have more of that spillover crowd. So if you're in one of those areas, you're on a Saturday, you have something that we think is going to be a real attention grabber, we'll ask you to have some volunteers available to say to folks, hey, could you come back in a little bit? Remind people to keep things moving and keep space available. But that kind of magic 50-person number right now is, we won't approve any permit application that has more than 50 people reflected in your dedicated space at any one time. And again, that could change over the course of a day. And sorry, just last point on that number, that 50-person cap right now is the state cap on non-essential gatherings outside of exemptions to that, which we know are growing. For certain types of activities. If that number does increase with the state, then we anticipate that this guideline would change as well for open culture. Obviously, there's a point where we're going to have to, we won't be able to support hundreds of events in the 1,000-person capacity happening all over the street. So as the gathering limits change, we'll modify, but we do expect there to be at least a little bit of increase for that number.
Thank you. This is a question from Robin. Can a sponsoring organization sponsor more than one different group per month in the same location?
Yeah, yes, but they're going to be limited to the 4 total. So if we're counting for that sponsor, it's going to be that sponsor can have 4 events total at that location. So it's up to them to decide how they want to distribute that. But again, one location is one of up to 200 locations throughout the city that organization can have an event at. So that's 800 events in theory throughout the city.
It's a question from Laura. Is there going to be a process for potentially adding new locations to this program?
Right now, so DOT is in charge of vetting, taking solicitation of suggestions of the streets and vetting the streets. A lot of work went into choosing those streets. This is the first kind of pilot phase of streets, and I think we're going to stick through with these streets through at least March and April, and then we're going to evaluate how the program is going and potentially add more streets. But right now, this is what you will see by the end of this week, and they all should be probably up on our website by now. That is the kind of final list for the first batch of streets.
I have a question from Brandon, who is located near an open culture street. He's wondering if the 4 events per location limit is a total limit for the location, or is that a limit for applicants, per applicant, excuse me.
For applicant. Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead, Ellen.
It's per applicant. I think this raises a great question, and that's sort of the other side of this. I know we have a lot of representatives from our community boards here, and it is going to be a balance. It is not our intention to book out 31 days of shows on every single street. There will definitely be a little bit of back and forth with community boards and others about what is manageable. So there is not a hard limit right now on the total number of event days per block, but we'll be working with individual communities and neighborhoods to try to strike that balance.
A question from Colleen: what happens if there's cars who are parked in the no parking sign spaces where they have an event planned? Can the permit holder organize to have them towed, or do they need to involve someone else like the police?
Yeah, I can go. I mean, in theory, you have the signs up well in advance that the cars know to move. These are going to be part of the reason why these streets are on selected streets, so that these streets and communities are used to these events happening and don't leave their cars there frequently. We do understand that there are going to be instances where cars are going to be left there. That is, going to be, unfortunately, going to be a reality of part of this program. Working with your local precinct to try to get those signs up in time and request towing if available. I cannot guarantee that it will be available, but if it is possible, the NYPD can help tow. I don't want to make that promise that it's going to be available in every instance. If not, you're going to have to work around it, but it's really getting information out to the community that you're having an event and that they're aware that the event is coming. Even flyering so people know that there's an event happening is going to be part of the responsibility to make sure that everyone's aware it's coming.
And I'm seeing a few questions from folks asking where they can get these no parking flyers or any other materials that might be available.
The no parking flyers will come directly from your precinct. There is going to be that aspect of needing to have some relationship there, and we will help you with that and make sure you know where to go. The beauty of that is them giving you the no parking flyers is also how we ensure that it is on that precinct's radar, that you are having your event at that time and that no parking is required. And if there are resources available to tow, that will happen. I will just be so candid with everyone from having worked on street events for a lot of years. This is a pickle. If you've ever been towed, you know that it can be very easy to miss a no parking sign, or for whatever reason, there's an emergency and you didn't get to your car. And the resources to tow are limited. So we will encourage creativity. I would, not encourage anyone to put in huge financial resources to your build out that requires absolutely every square inch of the space. Flexibility when doing outdoor performances, certainly, and performances in the street is really going to be key. But sorry, long answer to those signs are available specifically from your police precinct.
I have a question from Jennifer. Are event organizers allowed to accept cash on site for tickets to their events?
Yes. So yeah, we might have to cause some confusion. So what's prohibited is sales of goods and services, because that's just a different it's a different permit from consumer affairs. Now I'm a little nervous. I'm saying that wrong. Stefan, am I right? Tickets can be sold online, okay, or on site.
Yes. I mean, we encourage you.
That is the only transaction that can take place on site.
I also forgot to mention that there's nothing precluding you from promotional or sponsorship of these events. You know, historically, SAPO has had pretty restrictive policies on sponsorship, which would go hand in hand with the fees, but there's nothing to preclude you from sponsoring this event by anyone or any other commercial entity, or using this event to promote other events that you have on private property, et cetera.
Seeing a few questions about the types of materials that folks can use to designate emergency lanes or create street closures. Are there any minimum requirements for that, such as cones or barricades or even tape to mark out different lanes or areas?
In terms of closing the street, I would say that cones or barricades are preferable. Vehicles are, you're not permitted to use a vehicle to close the street. Obviously, if a fire truck's trying to get down the street, that you need to move the car, and that's going to become a hazard to that whole situation. So we would recommend cones or barricades. In terms of delineating the emergency lane, I mean, just to give an example of what an emergency lane is, I think most people have been to a New York City street fair. The lane down the middle where everybody's walking, that is the emergency lane. It does not need to be marked, but it needs to be clear of everything but people. If you have barricades at the end of the street that are not open for an emergency lane, you need to have staff manning those barricades at all times. That is just to ensure that fire trucks have access to the street and an emergency that might happen on that street or on another street.
I have a question from Francine. Can a location be shared between two or more groups or organizations?
We would not issue two concurrent permits at the same time. If you want to apply for a permit together, that is okay. If you're having, obviously, if you're going to have two sets of amplified sound, that might result in you needing two sound permits. And I'm not an expert on the sound permit procedure, but I'm pretty sure they would not issue two different sound permits for the same street. We would allow you to have two groups partnering together, and that's kind of how we are already proposing with sponsors and applicants partnering together. But it would all fall under one permit, and the person who applied and the sponsor would be the ones that are responsible for what takes place there. So if you're allowing another group to use your permit, so to speak, you are responsible for what takes place at that event. And that would be kind of, we would hold you to anything that went wrong there and potentially deny future permits if there was an issue.
A question from Letty. Acknowledging that the sale of food is not allowed, but can they host a ticketed event that includes food that is not for sale?
So I will say,
sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
Food gets into just really tricky things requiring food handlers licenses. I would encourage people to just be creative with a gift bag model. Alcohol rules apply. You're still in a public space, so you know all of those things. We're not going to have someone monitoring every single event, but like I would not encourage you to make a food handout a major part of your event. The city requires food handlers licenses for literally any distribution of food in a public space. So that's why the limitations around food are so are pretty hard and fast here. That being said, I saw a question earlier on the comments which I loved, which is a cafe that abuts one of these streets. So can they sell items to patrons and they can then take it into the space with them? Absolutely. So that might be a good opportunity for folks to look at like a partnership they could do with something that's nearby, or make it clear to people that if it's what you like for your event, if you don't mind if people are like unraveling their sandwiches in the middle of Lysistrata, then you know they could absolutely bring in their own food and beverage.
Yeah, I would say just there's no reason why anyone couldn't bring food into the event. And if you're encouraging people to patronize a restaurant on the street to then consume that food, not alcohol, because that would be violating open container laws, but to consume food that they purchased at another location on that street in your event, that is fine. But distributing food at your event is not permitted.
Okay, I have a question from Jirina. Is a base for a floor considered a stage? They're looking to put down synthetic ice that needs a flat, hard, and level surface. So presumably this would not be an elevated but a flat surface?
This is a good question. I think we'll seek to clarify this in FAQ and guidelines. What this stage and sound permit limitation, and we can pause on this because I know it's really, really tricky, but it's really what we've used to be able to have performances up to this point, with the intention being right now, if you only have 50 people and you're not trying to attract people from all around, there's a lot that can be done, and a lot we've seen successfully done without amplified sound. Media and Entertainment executed some really incredible Broadway in the Boroughs performances without amplified sound. That said, A, this might change. B, sound permits are being granted right now. We absolutely know that there are some precincts that are a little confused about this, and so we'll be working with each applicant to make sure if they need a sound permit, they're getting it. And I think the rollout of this will help a little bit with the communication with precincts who maybe thought that sound permits shouldn't be given out at all right now. The question that they will ask for folks who are applying for the sound permit is there a stage? And they probably have a specific idea about that. From our perspective, I think if we see a permit and there's not an elevated stage, the purpose is not to have both sound and visibility from a large vantage point. Something like a smooth surface could be a really great workaround for dancers, et cetera, who might need that smooth surface, but you're not actually putting a stage in.
Right. Seeing a question from Tim and a couple others. Are there best practices for crowd control and social distancing? Seeing a few questions about, how do we control folks who are passing by who may not have tickets for the event as well?
We'll have some good examples of this, so really want to encourage folks to read the FAQ that will be on our website, because we touch on a couple of things. Some of it is just going to be dependent on how high traffic your area is, how much potential foot traffic there is, what type of event you have. But part of it definitely will be having as part of your staffing plan, some volunteers who are stationed at either side, just reminding folks to stay distance. How we have signage that will be available linked from our website that you could print, reminding people to social distance. So things like that to just sort of keep the reminders up.
Yeah, I think also just the other examples from our FAQ were that, and I think I said this before, were to live stream or share content from your event after it takes place as a means to promote it, but not necessarily have everyone attend. Have seats or a designated area within your performance space for people to actually sit in socially distant, and to promote the event, but don't share the exact time and location with anyone but the ticket holders. That's another example.
There's a question from Meredith, and what steps are being taken or considered to ensure that open culture events are accessible for people with disabilities?
Well, I would say on a positive front, none of these will have stairs leading up to them, elevators, escalators, et cetera. So in terms of an ability, that opportunity, I think will be pretty mobility accessible. We do not have guidelines written in requiring audio and visual accessibility. So would encourage industry and community to, that would be, we would love to see performances that do meet a variety of accessibility needs, but it is not written into the guidelines.
Yeah, I think there's also on our FAQ, there's a question about disabilities and with some more information from New York City Commission on Human Rights on what's permissible and what's not.
I have a question from Kimberly, who's asking if venues or event producers have to notify the local health department of large events through this program.
Not for this program, no.
Question from Robin, presumably about the possibility of hosting events on consecutive days in the same location. Can event materials such as barricades, cones, or chairs be left in an on-street area such as a parking space, an off-street area such as a parking space or sidewalk. So not in the travel lane.
That is really just going to be a no for security reasons. I think if you were able to secure a parking spot with a truck that could store those elements, that might be a good option, but we can't leave elements out in the street or out accessible to the public overnight.
I have another question from a person also named Robin. This is a different Robin. Will there be a website where people can check for the listings of the latest open culture events?
So this is a great question, and I think I want to answer some other questions I've seen about publicizing. This is going to be tricky. We are not at this point going to publish on our website every single open cultural event that's happening. We're going to really put it to the applicants to determine what kind of publicity you're looking to get. First of all, I can tell you we do get a lot of traffic to our website, but I don't think it's like the first place. I don't think a government website is the first place anyone is going to go to look for cultural performances, or rather my government website rather. You all probably have a lot of existing relationships for getting the word out, and especially with the limitations being so very small right now on the number of participants, we're not looking to encourage necessarily like a come one, come all type of publicity. So that's kind of a quick answer right now. All of our permits there is a website that exists where you can see any permit that's granted. So your permit will be public, but we will not be necessarily like publishing a calendar of events. As this gets rolling, and I think especially as we see how things work out with crowd management, we may have an option where in your permit process, you can just check a box that says, yes, I want this to be included in a calendar of events. So that might roll out. In terms of publicizing generally, we recognize that this is a little bit of a thorny area. So you can absolutely publicize your event. You can say, we're holding this performance on this day. What we'll be encouraging everyone to do is just being mindful that you're not adding to a potentially unmanageable crowd. So saying things like, please purchase tickets in advance, limited seating available, limited tickets available. If you have a band that's playing over the course of the day, encouraging people to come at different types of hours, posting things after the event, obviously a huge and big way to do things are saying, having a live stream option, having a video available after the event to give folks that other opportunity. Again, it's going to be a little bit tricky, but what we wouldn't want to see is, like I said, a sort of everybody tell your friends, tell everybody come out to the street at this time. Something a little more measured is absolutely okay.
Okay, so we have about 4 minutes left. I guess we'll take a couple of more questions. We'll leave the chat open for about a minute later after we end this to gather some more questions if you have any. And let's take a couple more.
Where did that go? I just saw a question disappear, but the question, I can't remember the name of the questioner, but the question was, is there a maximum ticket price for events?
No maximum.
See a question from Felicia. What happens if the applicant cannot confirm talent until after they submit their application?
So we have asked for a run of show and a detailed list of talent. Recognize that some of those decisions might be making as you go. Again, that's what we're using to check for that kind of celebrity big crowd draw. It's fine to put in some placeholder information, be as detailed as you can. If you're saying, we have a 4-piece jazz quartet, please don't show up with a 25-person like aerial performance featuring Kanye West. But I think the basics, as much information as you can. And again, you'll have like a live human being who's actually working with you on all of this. So you can let them know, okay, we're waiting to confirm a couple of the performers, but this is the general plan.
I have a question from Kristen, who's asking if they're only using half the length of the street, do they need to block the whole street if it's a one-way, allowing parking and vehicle access to happen on the other half of the street?
Sorry, is the question is if it's a two-way, can they only block one way of the street?
I think it's,
Yeah,
do they need to block the entire length of the street
Yes.
if the event's only
Yeah.
taking place on
yes.
half the
If your event is happening on anywhere on the block, even if it's at the end of the street where cars exit, you do need to close the street at the other end of the street. Traffic cannot flow with your event.
However, you would not need to clear that street of cars. So if you're able to accommodate of parked cars, I'm sorry. So if you can make your event work without having to do no parking signs, that's absolutely fine. Just realizing that folks might need to, move their car during the course of your day.
Yeah, and I would just recommend that you have your volunteers prepared to help kind of escort that car out. But you would not want to allow additional cars to move back onto the street while your event is taking place.
All right, last question.
Okay, last one from Christopher. Do performers need to be masked?
Could someone from media, I think that there are specific regulations for performance types. Ariel or cultural affairs, anybody? Do performers need to be masked?
I think you have to be 12 feet away from the performance in order for the performers not to be masked if need be. We can make sure to get the exact language and link and send it out, but there does have to be a distance requirement there, as there is with the ancillary, background music within venues that is currently allowed. Jose, I am correct. So singers, for example, would be allowed. All right. Well, this has been an extraordinarily thorough presentation. Thank you so much to Stefan and to Ellen for presenting this program. We know that everyone would very much like for us all to open up and be back to normal as soon as possible. And this is just one step in that direction as we are steadily and safely returning to life and culture in our streets and in our city. Thank you again to Commissioner Andel Castillo from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, Commissioner Van Bremer for the legislation which created this program. And I really must thank Ellen and Stefan again, who have really taken on this Herculean effort to really bring the city back. We will continue to gather these questions. You're welcome to reach out to the Office of Nightlife as well as to the Open Culture Program website for information. Also, I know a lot of people have been asking where they can get this video. Right after this call, it will be on the Office of Nightlife Facebook, which has been streaming. You can take it and share it from there. And we'll also be sharing it in our next newsletter. So thank you to Team Nightlife, Jose and Kevin and Francesca. Want to just wish you all good health and continued perseverance and strength. Every day in this is another day out. We're seeing the rest of the city slowly and gradually open, and we're on our way, and this is one step in the right direction. So hang in there. Thank you for everything you're doing to stay strong, and feel free to reach out to the Office of Nightlife anytime so that we can help support you through this. Thank you.